Well, welcome, Gina, to the Moms of Tweens and Teens podcast. And it's great to have you on today.
And thank you so much, Cheryl. This is really my niche audience because I have 3 children in this age span, so between ages 11 and 18.
Yeah, well, I am so excited about what we're going to talk about. And I feel like it's perfect timing for me to be talking about all the things that you talk about in your new book, SuperMom, 5 Ways to Reclaim Your Superpower and Thrive as a Mom. And I'm launching a 3-day free training next week. And then we open up the membership and I'm like doing all of this multitasking and I'm feeling exhausted and overwhelmed and was reading your book. I told you before we got on here and I'm like, oh, Gina would say it's okay for me to power nap. So I'm just going to take a nap. So I'm just kind of looking at this time like I'm going to get filled up and nourished, just listening to what you have to share. So I was really, really looking forward to being with you today.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that.
So before we jump in, why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself and your personal story and what led you to write this book?
Okay. I'm Gina Fontaine. I actually grew up in the Midwest in Indiana. I was the youngest of 10 children. And so I consider my mother to be the original supermom. And she raised 10 of us kids, pretty amazing. And she really demonstrated to me the importance of self-care. That power nap that you were talking about, that was something that Sharon Bosler did every single day after lunch. And even though I was a 5-year-old, I can remember wandering away, making sure she was asleep and then, going and playing. She would always tell me when I had children, so I have 3 children that are now 11, 14, and 18. And I can remember when they were infants, she would always say, now when the baby naps, you nap. Well, what mom does that? Some really disciplined moms, but at the time that was, okay, this is when I flip into busy mode and get all my tasks done. And it's not until now that I'm, a more seasoned mom that I see the value of those little rests. And parenting teens and tweens, which is where all of my kids are right now, especially during pandemic times when you are at home with your children, and it's just really the recipe for a perfect storm. And so I became a single mom in 2017, and that experience really led me to the conclusion that I absolutely had to put myself at the top and take care of myself so that I could fulfill all the responsibilities now being on my own. And I left an abusive situation, and unfortunately my oldest was the victim of the abuse, and that left a lot of trauma marks on him. And during the pandemic, it was just like everything flared. He was going through some major depression and actually attempted to take his life. And thank goodness he was unsuccessful, and he is still here with us today. But that situation in May of 2020 was when I had to find somewhere to put my thoughts and my pain. And I did a lot of walking. I'm sure a lot of people did during our lockdown time. And I would just voice record what I was feeling or thinking on that day. And out of curiosity, I would come home and listen. And I started to transcribe it. And I realized, you know what? I bet I'm not the only mom going through these difficulties right now. And so I just kept going. I kept writing with the encouragement of some friends that said, there are people out there that are going to really appreciate your vulnerability and sharing the struggles and the challenges that you've experienced as a mom. And so I went for it. And then at a certain point, I thought, nobody wants to hear my drama. Nobody. Who wants to read this story? It's not, well, it didn't seem uplifting to me at the time, but in retrospect, now when I read it, I see where there's a lot of material to give moms hope, because I didn't just get through it, I feel like I thrived through it. And my background is in health and wellness. So I have a lot of tools that I've collected in my 27-year career as a fitness trainer and health and wellness professional. So I really implemented those during my most stressful times, and really prior to the pandemic, my then 15-year-old, he did everything that you don't want your teenagers to get into. And that's when I was throwing my hands up like, hey, I'm a good person. I'm a former, number 2 in her class in high school and all-star athlete. And where did I go wrong that I have a kid who's doing drugs, not going to school, cutting classes? It just baffled me. And I put it on myself, and I started saying, where did I go wrong? What did I do? And that's an awful place to be as a mom, to feel like I've done it all wrong. I've messed up my kid. And what parent hasn't had that feeling at some point in time during our parenting journey? You're, at least I know I am, constantly questioning, okay, is that the right thing to do? Am I doing this right? And there really is no perfect guidebook, right, for parenting. That's at least what I discovered.
Yeah, no, there is not.
I found that oftentimes reading the expert written guidebooks, by this great PhD, or I would wind up feeling like a failure after reading the book. Like, well, I can't do all that. How am I going to implement all that? And when you're in total overwhelm and total stress, for me, my brain doesn't absorb material when I'm in constant fight or flight. And that's an unknown fact. Like, our executive function shuts down when we're constantly stressed. And so I could read a book, attend a class, but it wouldn't stick. And so ultimately what I discovered was, if I just took care of myself, elevated my vibration, stayed in a more positive mindset, and really just embraced that things were messy, going through a divorce and restructuring your family, it's messy. And accepting that it was going to be messy for a while, and that once I got to that place of peace, and it's still a daily practice, that's when things started to shift for me. And I thought, this can be a book. And then I resumed writing again, realizing that this can be a book that helps validate moms on their path, and dads too, for that matter. And this is certainly not exclusively a mom read. I have had men read the book and gain value from what I present.
Yeah. I want to thank you for writing the book, for having the courage. It is a vulnerable book where you share your story and your struggle. And I'm just struck by how it was you expressing your pain and letting it out that really brought a lot of healing. And then through your own pain, you are essentially blessing others by putting it out there into the world so that they know that they're not alone. And I think that that's a beautiful thing, when we can take our own pain and make meaning from it and offer something. And that's what we need. I mean, it's like you said, we want to, find the answer, just tell me what to do, which is so normal.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of pain involved in just getting, letting that out and putting yourself first, where you can just slow down and just have that time to reflect. So, and through that, you ended up, I love your reflective questions, and how through that process in the book, you give such wonderful tools of how to shift your mindset and how to take care of yourself when you're in the pit.
Yeah. And in the pit. And, I can remember being in a place where it seemed like every single day there was a crisis. And I would literally be calling the crisis line to get help, because my son was very angry, and he tells me he doesn't even remember some of the episodes where he would turn on me. And become verbally abusive. And when you are just in a constant state of fight or flight, I've been there where you know, there's tools. Like, I'm a yoga teacher. I've been teaching yoga for 25 years, and my yoga practice didn't even necessarily ground me. It's kind of like sometimes the deep breathing almost made the feelings bubble up more. and I thought,
totally
okay,
get that.
yeah, so much for calming down. This is, and there's this, saying that feeling is healing. And so, there's a lot of ways we can suppress feeling, and we can drink a bottle of wine. We can eat a carton of Haagen-Dazs, and it might make things feel better in that particular moment. But until we allow those uncomfortable feelings to arise, and that's where I really feel support is so important, and that we moms have to stay together in community and share in my case, sharing my experience, strength, and hope for moms that, might be shuttered and thinking, I'm too ashamed to share my story. And what I found that my sharing has opened the door for other women to say, oh, I didn't want to say anything, but I'm really having a tough time with my daughter or my son, and here's what's going on. Because the truth is, it's not all graduations, high school dances, and honor roll. Like, there's other things that happen. They just don't get posted on social media, and we don't see those elements of life. But it's still, I talk about in the book, living in fullness, and I define living in fullness is when you can take your whole life experience, the good, the bad, the ugly, the nice, the not so pretty, and just embrace it all. Yeah. The same way that we do when our kid is, screaming and yelling and throwing a tantrum, or we still love them, we still embrace them. And so, but why can't we do the same to ourselves when we show up, quote unquote, imperfect? I see the pattern. I do it myself. We tend to go towards self-sabotage, like, oh, darn it, why am I doing this again? And I maybe yelled at my kids again today, and I vowed I wasn't going to do that anymore. Yep. It's it's just like, yep, there that is again. And I'm going to love that part of myself, because that's part of me, and it's who I am today.
And I'm not alone in it. And I'm human. I'm not perfect.
Mm-hmm.
You write a lot about that in the book. Well, tell us, this is such good stuff, and I want to get a little deeper in it, but tell us what the 5 myths are that you share in the book.
Yes. So the 5 myths are things that I recognize that we live by as moms that aren't necessarily healthy for us. So myth number 1 is that a good mom always puts her kids first. Well, if that's to the detriment of your own health and well-being, it might not be the best thing. Myth number 2 is moms are master multitaskers. Well, absolutely we are, because it's like, it becomes like basic survival as more kids join the family. And yet we know scientifically that our brain can only focus on one meaningful task at a time. And so it might look like we're being productive, but are we really? And again, at what expense to our health and well-being? Again, myth number 3 is being a mom is tough. And how many times you probably couldn't go a day during the pandemic where you didn't hear somebody saying, oh, it's so tough. Being a mom is tough. And yeah, it is. But if you verbalize that on a daily basis, you'll tend to attract more. That's the lens you're going to see life through. And so you'll tend to see that, yeah, it's tough. Or you can say, and first it's like you have to change the lens, and then saying something like being a mom's easy, being a mom is fun, and start to look for evidence of that. And it's not that easy. I acknowledge that. Myth number 4 is being a mom is exhausting. And again, who doesn't say that?
Yeah.
And so that's about really realizing what is draining your energy. Like Cheryl, you mentioned that you've been multitasking and doing all this stuff to get ready for your event. And then you feel it at the end of the day. And so how can we then create that being a mom is exhilarating, and, you know, what lights you up?
I
And what...
love that in the book, by the way.
Mhm.
It just, the energy feels different. Like
Yeah.
I relate to even, I'm so tired. You know, like that's one that I will say, or waking up in the morning, oh, I just don't have enough time. And then it's like, it just feels like all this weight
Yes.
versus changing our language. So I even have to say it out loud, you know, like, you are excited about today. I'm so grateful about today. You know, it really is. It's switching up our mindset, which
Yeah.
it's so helpful in the book how you talk about how to do that. But anyway, so number 5,
And number 5 is, and I think we hear this all the time, moms do it all. And that it's impossible. First of all, moms can't possibly do it all. And on the flip side of that, it's where in your life can you let go of control and stop trying, especially with our teenage kids who are so close to flying the, you know, from the nest. And where can we, you know, my situation, stop waking my son up to go to school and say, you know what, he gets to experience the repercussions of his inability to, it was just simply turning on the computer to go to school. And he wasn't able to do that. And yeah, it's hard to get a call from the principal saying your kid is flunking out of school. But you know what, it's not, at that point in time, it's not my responsibility. It's on him. And it's so hard, you know, when our kids are making poor choices that we think are going to mess them up for the rest of their lives. And in the end, he got his GED and he's, you know, off working full time now. And I celebrate his success and I expect great things for him in the future.
Yeah.
And I could still be there. And I call it meddling, where you're just always having to like put the pieces of your kid's life together so that they become the straight A honor student or the best athlete or get into Stanford. And it's like our role as parents is more to just be like, hey, I got you. I got your back. I'm here to help you be who you're here to be. And we all have hopes, dreams, and aspirations for our kids. But I feel like as we surrender that and just say, you know, the happiness, the fulfillment as a parent will be just when I allow my child to take those steps on their own, the steps and the stumbles on their own, because that's how we grow.
I love that. So I think we have to pause on this because it's so good and it's so difficult to do as moms, as the moms are listening. So what were you like as a mom when you were trying to get your son up, when you were trying to control the trajectory, the decisions he was making? How, I always say, how's that working for you? Like, how was that working for you?
It felt to me like the more I pushed, the more he resisted. And it was kind of like, oh, I'll just stay in bed till 2 instead of noon.
Yeah.
And I'll show you. Same thing with the vaping. I would constantly, you know, sweep through his room, and if I'd find him, I'd swipe him and throw him away. Well, guess what? He'd just call a friend and he'd go get another one, and they would keep reappearing. And I realized, okay, he's going to, again, have to experience the repercussions of this. And now these days he tells me, oh, I can't run anymore. I'm coughing too much. Well, eventually one day, maybe when he's 20, he'll want to run again and he'll realize that the vaping has to be eliminated. It's so hard though, to
Yeah,
to release our children to their life lessons lovingly, not with guilt, like, oh, you're going to hurt yourself, or you're so lazy. And those things came out of my mouth. I'm sure, I'd go down there and, oh my gosh, you're so lazy. Why can't you get up? And that's not helpful either. And so I lovingly release you to your life lessons is a mantra that I became very familiar with.
Yeah, that's a good one. I release you to your life lessons.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really giving them back ownership of their lives. And I think that's it's hard to do, but it's so important. Like, you get to choose how you want to live your lives. I can't live your life for you.
Yeah.
And I think that really makes kids think, because there's no resistance there anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And they just have themselves. They're stuck with themselves and their own choices. Like you said, he was resisting so much of what we were trying to do to control, and it just wasn't working. So how has your relationship changed since you started handing him back his life?
Well, at this point, he turned 18 last month, and he got an apartment with a friend. And I'm just going with the no news is good news. I continue to send him texts and say, I love you. Hope things are going well. Invitation. Do you want to go have lunch? I'm not hearing back from him. And I don't take that personally as, I take it as he just needs time and space to establish his independence. And when he's ready, and I do have communication through his counselor, and I figure when he's ready and has worked through whatever he's working through, then we can reboot our relationship. And I have found I've had periods of time where he was not living with me when he was younger. He lived with his dad. He lived with a friend for a while, and our relationship was much better then. It was getting together, and I wasn't on top of him being, in the authority role. And it gave us an opportunity to connect on a deeper level and come to the realization that he's a really bright, and he explores new ideas, and he teaches me about Bitcoin and things. So he's very aware. He has a vision of that his life is going to be very different from the status quo. So I'm proud of him for that he, says, I'm not going to go right to college. I'm going to save money and figure out what I really want to do. And I celebrate that, because that's not the necessarily normal thing to do. And he's aware that he doesn't want to waste his money going to college and not having clarity on what he wants to study. So I respect that.
Yes. Very independent of him.
Yeah.
Living on his own and making his way and deciding what he wants to do. I think that we get so bogged down in the way that we think it's supposed to look.
Yeah.
Based on our families and how we grew up and all that. And then you have a kid that goes to college, but they're partying all the time. And, it's like, and not, of course, all kids are doing that, but just because they're going to college doesn't mean that that's necessarily, the best decision for them. So I think, to figure out, like, I have a friend and her kids all went to 2 years of community college, saved money, then they went on to a regular college, and that was a great choice for them. Like, it looks different. Your son got his GED.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that's
when he passed it with flying colors.
Yeah. Which of do you particularly, you said you keep rereading your book because it helps you, which I can see that because you ask such good questions. Is there one particular chapter right now that's speaking to you?
It's interesting. I was back home in Indiana a few weeks ago and just having some struggles with family. And as I was leaving to go to the airport, my mom handed me my book and she said, "This is what you need to read on the airplane." and she was absolutely right. And I think that the general message of positivity of everything's always working out for you, and everything's here to help you, even when it doesn't feel like it, when you're in the moment and it's excruciating and you just want to get to the other side where it's more comfortable. The being in the uncomfortable place of when we're making changes in our life, it's not necessarily, it might be simple, like, oh, here, surrender control. And that's probably for me what's speaking the most, is just step out of the way and surrender control, which is myth number 5, kind of the flip side of mom does it all, is instead surrender control and recognize where you can. Well, it goes back to the serenity prayer, really. It goes, like, help me to know what I can control, what I can't, and, where I need to.
The wisdom to know the difference.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And ultimately the piece of self-love, of wrapping my loving arms around myself in those moments of despair, or I don't know what to do, and why does my kid keep misbehaving, and having compassion for myself instead of, why can't I get this right? And why do I keep making the same mistakes over and over? Those type of questions aren't helpful. And I like to write, I even put this in the book, where I have a statement that I make. Like I claim living in a healthy, harmonious home. And I wasn't even close to that 2 years ago, but I wrote it down on a piece of paper, thought about it every day, put it in a box, and in a way just offered it up, to the higher power, the sovereign being in me, that everything's going to work out if I keep my lens focused on a healthy, happy, harmonious home. And it starts again with you, mom, as if you're at peace, it's amazing how the vibration of peace just kind of goes out beyond you to others. And our kids, they have little radars, and they can sense us. It's really amazing. Even babies, especially babies, I think, have these radars of really tuning into our anxiety or our anger or whatever it might be. And I'm not even saying don't feel angry, don't feel anxious, because I know that we're going to, but let it be okay. Like, okay, today's just going to be one of those high anxiety days. So I'm going to need to take that power nap. I'm going to need to go for maybe 2 or 3 walks to process through this, and just let it be okay that it's like there's something in it. There's maybe a message in it. And if you're willing to stay with it, emotion, the word it's an energy in motion. So if you can just be with that energy for a little while, it will move and it will transform into something else. But when we suppress it, and I think there's like the law of attraction movement of, like, I think it's been misinterpreted, where people are like, oh, I can't feel sad because then I'll attract bad things, or I can't feel angry because then I got to raise my vibe. Well, my interpretation of that is feel the sadness, feel whatever it is you're feeling with self-compassion, love yourself through that, and don't make yourself wrong, because it's the making yourself wrong and trying to fix yourself that tends to deplete you. And and again, we're trying to live the spiritual path. And I had this realization a few weeks ago. I was listening to a meditation master named Muji, and he said, isn't it funny how we've westernized spirituality, and it's all about doing, the right mantra and doing the right practice and going to see,
performing the mindfulness.
And I was like, you know what? He is absolutely right. We have totally westernized even spirituality, to when the message is to just be and allow. And it's just our nature as Americans. We always feel like we have to go about and do and create and manifest. And what if you just, all you had to do was open yourself up to receive something that you can't even conceive of in your head, like this or something even greater beyond my wildest dreams and imagination.
I love that, because what you're saying, what I'm getting from this is just how important it is, like, to feel what we're feeling, but we don't want to feel what we're feeling if it's pain or if it's uncomfortable. And so then we try to get ourselves out of it by whatever that looks like, whether it's drinking the wine, it's eating the Haagen-Dazs, it's beating ourselves up, and then we can turn on ourselves and blame ourselves and all those things, or trying to just make it go away. It's like trying to make anxiety go away, but the more you try to make it go away, the worse it becomes. Like, don't feel anxious, don't feel anxious. Oh my gosh, I'm anxious, And then I went to the races. It's just like, okay, I'm feeling what I'm feeling, and that's okay. Like, it's okay to feel what I feel and surrendering to it. And through that surrender and that self-compassion, then we can actually move through into a more like abundant, spacious place of being, because we're not resisting. I think it's, it's that resistance, that energy of just keep resisting whatever that is, whether it be our kids are doing something or we're feeling something. The more that we're trying to grasp it and control it, it just doesn't work.
Well, it's constrictive when we do that.
Yes.
I'm going to quote my book here. I say in the book, grow, get big, expand, and the universe is going to fill that space in ways you never ever planned. But you have to open that space up first. And when we're like in there meddling and trying to control, we don't allow new possibilities to come in.
Yeah, it's faith too, right? Faith, like trusting that there's a God, or however that looks, that's for you, that's in it. Like, you're not alone in it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So self-compassion. So what are some of the messages when you're practicing self-compassion that you say to yourself?
I love myself, like standing in the mirror. And that's a powerful practice. I probably don't do it enough, but I think it was maybe 2 days after my divorce was finalized, and I was out hiking and just processing and kind of like, oh, okay, I'm free. And I met this older gentleman on the trail, and I swear it was like having a connection with God, but somehow we got talking about my experience. And basically his message to me was, your ex may never be nice to you. So every day I just want you to say, I love you. I love you. Stand in front of the mirror and say, I love you. I love you. I love you. And just like, we can't control our external environment, the people around us. And, our kid might always insult us when they're a 16-year-old, know-it-all. We can't control that, but I can control whether I react to it or respond to it or ignore it. And so staying in that place of, I love myself more today than I did yesterday, and embracing your experience, whatever it is. And that sounds way too simplistic, because when that concept was first introduced to me by a friend, I was like, oh, sure. Yeah. Love myself when my whole world is erupting and I'm, hardly making any money and on welfare. And yeah, I'll love myself. But it worked. And it took a lot of time, and baths and just finding those practices that were nourishing. You said the word nourishing, and nourishing myself instead of, I had such a long history of bashing myself, because that's kind of the way when I'm an athlete, and that's like no pain, no gain. And so I would instead flog myself for not getting it right. And when I started realizing that these stumbles and these imperfections were actually growth opportunities, it changed the perspective for me, and to love myself through those growth periods.
I really enjoy in the book how you talk about changing your perspective, You acknowledge what's true. So it's not like you're denying it. But
Mhm.
even when I say to myself, like you just said, oh, this is an opportunity for me to learn about myself, or this is an opportunity where I can lean in and I will grow from this. I can grow from this. There's just a difference,
Mhm.
that when I say those things, and I have some people in my life that say those things to me, it's just really, really is helpful,
Mhm.
to think of it that way. Well, let's talk about, I have a final question. Um, I want to talk about boundaries because
Mhm.
I think that is an area that we really struggle with. And you were saying, all of the myths kind of fit into that, I'm not enough, I
Mhm.
got to do it all. And boundaries are so important. And I don't think that we're very good at it.
I know I wasn't. And
Yeah.
I had a friend, this was a year or so before I got divorced, and she was just said, I don't feel that you have any boundaries. And I just said, I don't even know what you're talking about. Isn't it good to be open and flexible? Because that's what I always prided myself in. I am so flexible and adaptable. And I was never putting a boundary with anything. And so it's been a 6-year process for me of learning does it mean to set a healthy boundary, to say, no, I'm not going to do that because it doesn't light me up. Like the word should, like I hear
Oh,
that with
yeah.
so
Oh,
many, I should exercise. Oh, I should volunteer for the board. Oh, I should,
be the home
should,
run.
should, should.
I should be the homeroom mom.
Right. I should volunteer for the field trip.
Yeah.
And when we go to that place of should, and I call it shoulding on yourself, it's like, I would rather hear women say, I get to exercise. Like then it becomes an opportunity and a privilege. And just like saying those two phrases, I should exercise versus I get to exercise today. It just
Uh-huh.
changes the whole experience. And I mean, my background is in fitness and I'm an exercise professional. And part of, finding the vitality and energy in life is finding some way to move your body that feels good to you. And that's, kind of one of my signatures is find fun movement to do all day long. I call them 1-minute wellness solutions that lift your spirits so that you can get through that. There should be a training program before we enter the tween and teen years, because I had no idea what I was in for. I thought I'd be, you're not dealing with a rational human with a fully formed brain. And I have to constantly remind myself that, and, to be strong. And, for me, doing physical movement, meditation, those are kind of like my armor that I keep myself, my defense against
Yeah.
the insults, against the pushback that we inevitably experience with kids of this age.
It makes a huge difference. I mean, and we know it, but I'm just always surprised, like, oh, yeah, I'm depleted. So if I'm depleted, I'm going to have a much bigger reaction towards whatever,
Mm-hmm.
whatever that is. If I'm hooked into my kid and the choices they're making, that is just taking so much energy. I'm not going to, I have to consciously think I am going to reclaim that. Like I'm going to take that energy over here that I'm focused on this kid and I'm going to pull it back. And what can I do?
Mm-hmm.
And you asked some good questions to reflect on. Can you think of any in the moment that are some of the questions that could help moms, like to set boundaries or to reclaim parts of their lives, take back ownership of their lives?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was asking how will my son find find success, or how, I don't know how that's going to happen for him, but to know that it's not about me taking the steps. It's again surrendering him to his life lessons, because I found that when I would go to him with advice, with this is what you need to do, step 1, step 2, step 3, he would just kind of look at me and roll his eyes and be like, I got this, Mom. And I think we forget that our kids really just want connection, that I'm a healer, I'm a fixer. So I always feel like I have to give them advice, and that's not necessarily what they want. They really just want to be heard and validated that, oh, it must be really frustrating to not know where you're going to go to look for a job, and to not know those steps. Would you like help from me? And that same thing happened when my son we gave him a date to find an apartment. And I would ask him for those 3 months, like, do you need help looking? Do you want my help? And I always got, no, I'm good. So, and
Okay.
it's asking and not just assuming, because I think when we're in that authoritarian role as parents and we just tell and instruct, I feel it's disrespectful to them as free thinking humans, that
Yes.
they know what they like and what they don't like. So
Those questions are so much more empowering to them.
mm-hmm.
Wow. And then if we do give advice and then they don't take it, then we're mad.
Yeah.
That they're not taking it. So it's just a setup for everybody.
Yeah.
It doesn't work well,
Yeah. And trusting that you planted the seeds early in life, and those, it's there. It might not be evident.
Moms, you have planted the seeds.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that it might be when they're 22 or 25 when you start to see, like, oh, okay, he's starting to eat healthy now, or he's starting to exercise again. And now those seeds they just needed some time to grow through the weeds of, so that they could become more fully themselves and kind of weed out, what's mom, what's dad, what's me, and what am I going to take and what am I going to leave behind as a child.
Exactly. Yeah. I would not have wanted to parent me. I know that. Sure. But my mom was not hooked into everything I was doing. Like, I think we are in this generation. We're just much more aware, I don't know. Have you found that as well? I mean, well, you grew up with 10 kids in your family.
Yeah.
So your parents couldn't, know every little gritty detail that was happening. But I know I certainly made lots of mistakes, and it wasn't until I was in my 20s that I kind of sorted a lot of that out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I guess we all have to go through our process, and I'm grateful that my oldest kind of went through that process sooner than later, and didn't become a 25-year-old who became defiant and didn't know what he wanted. So it's not necessarily the path that every parent would want for their child, but it seems at this moment, it seems to be working okay, and he's living independently, and that's what our greatest hope for our kids.
Absolutely. And who knows what amazing things he's going to do, because when you study, I put together a whole sheet for one of the workshops of all the people, so many people that we know every name that are well known, and they did not have traditional, up where they maybe dropped out of high school, or they dropped out of college, or Steven Spielberg, he had like ADHD and he didn't do well in school, and, but he picked up the camera, it's like, that each person had a unique path.
Yeah.
To what they do. So, well, tell everybody where to find your book. And moms, I can't recommend this book enough. Just it is like having a warm blanket, and you can get your tea and do the journaling exercises that you have in the book, the good questions, and shifting your mindset. I mean, thank you. And you'll, reading it, it's like, oh, I'm not alone that I feel this way.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, the book is available on Amazon. There's some great reviews that you can read that are already up there, and it just touches my heart to hear what people are already experiencing. That it's the kind of book where one mom says, I can just open it up, and what I need to read in the moment is just it always seems to be right there. And I even have a great grandma that read the book and, said, I wish I had had this book 50 years ago when I was first raising my own children. So that it feels so good that people are resonating with the self-reflection piece of the book. So it's also available on Barnes and Noble. And it appears to me that I need to create a workbook now. And I will be starting the SuperMom Club, where we'll be basically working together through the steps of the book. So I'm really excited to do that because it's more experiential. I know we all want to think that we can find the answer in that book or that class that we took, but it's a process. When we're learning to love ourselves, I wish it came innate that we just loved ourselves, and it seems like it would be the most natural thing in the world. But as moms, I feel like we give love really good, but can you turn that and give it to yourself? And that's kind of the ultimate gift of doing the experiential portion of the book.
Well, yeah, I love that you're doing that because groups of moms can encourage one another and hear each other's stories, and that's really powerful. When are you gonna do that? I mean,
so I'm launching on October 18th. I'm doing just a 10-day SuperMom Club challenge where I will be each of those 10 days offering it might be 20 minutes of SuperMom yoga. It might be, here's your awareness today. Find everything that is right instead of looking at all the things that are wrong. So it'll just be a day by day challenge of finding the good and nurturing yourself. And then, that will give women an opportunity to understand, okay, what's the SuperMom Club about? And I think I'm redefining SuperMom. It's not the woman who goes out and volunteers for everything and does it all. The SuperMom is the one that knows her boundaries and knows how to nourish and fill herself up so she can be an even better, stronger mom. And so I'm giving women 10 days to experience that. And then I'll be opening the SuperMom Club in November. So it'll be a monthly membership-based experience.
Good for you. That's awesome.
Yeah. Thank you.
So it's Gina Fontaine. Spell your name so they know exactly where to find your website and everything. Yeah.
So it's GinaFontaine.com. GinaFontaine.com is my website. And the Amazon, if you go to Amazon and put on "You Are a SuperMom."
You are a supermom. 5 ways to reclaim your superpower and thrive.
Correct.
So you can find, and I'll put the links in the notes podcast.
Wonderful.
So thank you so much for everything
Absolutely.
that you're putting out to the world and for all that you're doing. I appreciate you being on the show today.
Yes. Thank you, Cheryl. I appreciate it.